People knew him as a poor, ordinary man, a humble carpenter who never dressed richly and never drew attention. But what no one knew was that behind his simple appearance, he was a hidden billionaire. One day he booked a first-class ticket, hoping for a quiet journey. Instead, from the airport counter to the airplane cabin, he faced humiliation. They mocked him, insulted him, and even tried to kick him out, accusing him of stealing the ticket simply because he looked too poor to afford it. But none of them knew the shocking truth. He was the billionaire CEO of the same airline, the owner of the plane. What happened next will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, like, share, comment, and if you're here for the first time, make sure you subscribe. Let's dive in. Peter had never been the kind of man anyone paused to admire on the streets of Lagos. He didn't dress to impress, he didn't talk loudly, and he didn't carry himself with the confidence that wealth usually brought. His shirts were always faded from years of washing, his trousers were usually secondhand, and his slippers had flattened from long walks between job sites. His beard was never perfectly trimmed, and his hair often grew rough until he found time to cut it. To strangers, he looked like yet another struggling artisan trying to survive in a city that showed no mercy to the poor. But beneath that simple appearance was a gentle, kind-hearted man who believed the world still had goodness in it. Peter worked as a carpenter in Mushin, one of the busiest and most unforgiving neighborhoods in Lagos. He had inherited the skill from his late father, a man who always told him, "Son, wealth doesn't make a man, character does." Peter lived by those words. Every day he woke early, carried his worn-out carpenter's bag, and set out to fix broken chairs, doors, cupboards, and beds. His customers respected his craftsmanship, but rarely appreciated him as a person. Some underpaid him, some bargained too hard, some insulted him when work delayed, and others mocked him because he appeared too humble, too gentle, and too poor. Yet Peter never fought back. When insulted, he smiled. When cheated, he simply walked away. When mocked, he focused on his work. He believed that kindness was a seed that would eventually grow. But life didn't reward him immediately. His workshop was a tiny wooden shed squeezed between two noisy shops. It leaked whenever rain fell. His tools were old, most of them handed down from his father. His bench creaked as he worked. His hands carried scars from years of chiseling, hammering, and sanding. He earned just enough to pay rent, buy garai, and transport himself around Lagos. Sometimes he worked 15 hours a day just to survive. Still, Peter carried hope. One hot Wednesday afternoon, while repairing a customer's broken center table, his friend Kunle burst into the workshop like a whirlwind. Kunle was everything Peter wasn't. Loud, dramatic, and always dreaming of instant wealth. "Peter, today is your day," Kunle shouted, waving a colorful lottery flyer. Peter laughed without looking up. "My brother, every day you come with one new idea. Leave me to finish this work." Kunle wouldn't listen. "Take one ticket, just one. You never know what God can do." Peter hesitated. He disliked gambling, but Kunle kept pestering him, dramatically kneeling on the dusty floor until Peter finally gave in. "Oya, bring one. Let me buy so you will leave me to work." He bought the ticket for peace, tucked it into his carpenter bag, and forgot about it completely. Life continued the same way, slow, stressful, and predictable. He fixed furniture, delivered orders, and patched broken wardrobes. At night, he ate gari, listened to his small radio, and slept early to save energy for the next day. Weeks passed. Peter didn't even remember the lottery existed. Then one evening, everything changed. He was sitting outside his single room because NEPA had taken light again. The moonlight reflected on the dusty street as he soaked gari in a plastic cup. His small radio crackled as the announcer read out the winning lottery numbers. Peter wasn't listening at first, but something about the second number made him pause. It sounded familiar. He reached into his bag, pulled out the wrinkled ticket, and stared at it. His heart skipped. He checked the first number. It matched. He checked the second. It matched. He checked the third, fourth, fifth. Every number matched. Peter froze. For a long moment, he didn't breathe. He rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe the lantern light was deceiving him. He checked again, his fingers shaking uncontrollably. But the truth didn't change. The humble, unnoticed carpenter from Mushin had just won $1 billion, the biggest jackpot Nigeria had ever seen. His cup of curry slipped from his hands. His chest tightened as shock washed over him. He stood up, sat down again, stood up a second time, then burst into nervous laughter, unsure whether to scream or cry. His neighbors passed by without even glancing at him. They had no idea their quiet carpenter neighbor had become richer than the richest man in Lagos overnight. Peter didn't sleep that night. He sat awake until dawn, reading the numbers repeatedly. But when morning came, he made a decision that shocked even himself. He would tell no one. No family, no friends, no neighbors, not even Kunle, who persuaded him to buy the ticket. Peter didn't want a new life filled with noise, fake friends, and dangerous attention. He wanted peace. He wanted privacy. He wanted to stay the same humble man he had always been. Quietly, secretly, he claimed the money through a lawyer, registered anonymous companies, and hid his identity from the public. The world continued seeing him as a poor carpenter, unaware that behind his modest clothes now lived a billionaire. Peter had changed financially, but his heart remained the same. The world soon learned that destiny does not announce itself loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, to the man everyone mocks. Peter's life changed overnight, but not in the way most people expected. When many people win $1 billion, they buy mansions, luxury cars, gold watches, and designer clothes. But Peter did none of those things. The morning after he won, he still wore his faded blue shirt, still swept the floor of his workshop, and still fixed furniture for customers who didn't value him. His neighbors had no idea that the poor carpenter walking on their street could now buy the entire neighborhood if he wished. But Peter had a reason for keeping quiet. He had seen how money changed people. He had seen men destroyed by jealousy, families torn apart by greed, and friends turned into enemies. Peter wanted none of that. He wanted peace, not noise. He wanted purpose, not pride. So he chose to build his wealth quietly, far away from public attention. For months, he met secretly with lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors. Everything was done behind closed doors. Every document was signed without his real name ever appearing. All investments were made through private holding companies. Even his bank accounts were hidden behind layers of confidentiality. To the outside world, Peter was still that simple, unnoticed man walking around Mushin with a carpenter's bag on his shoulder. His first major investment was surprising, even to his advisors. While most new billionaires bought houses, Peter bought books. He read about global business, aviation, leadership, and investment strategies late into the night. Knowledge became his real wealth. He studied the world of airlines, fascinated by how something so massive operated above the clouds. He read about pilots, flight mechanics, airline debt, customer service, and the delicate balance needed to run an entire fleet. Then one day he discovered something interesting. Lion Airlines, one of Africa's biggest and most respected aviation companies, was drowning in silent debt. Publicly, they appeared successful, sleek planes, global routes, and thousands of customers. But behind the scenes, the company was struggling. Several foreign investors were quietly negotiating to buy controlling shares. Peter saw an opportunity. Lion Airlines was respected, but poorly managed. It needed a leader with a heart, not ego. Someone who understood humility, service, and humanity. Someone like him. So quietly, slowly, and cleverly, Peter began buying shares through different channels. No one suspected anything because he didn't dress or behave like a billionaire. Within 6 months, he owned 51% of the company's shares. Within a year, he became the undisputed majority owner of Lion Airlines. Not a single person knew the board assumed a foreign conglomerate had taken over. The managers assumed a silent Saudi investor was in charge. The pilots assumed one of those big foreign men had acquired control. No one ever imagined that the carpenter who once repaired a broken table for 3,000 naira was now the owner of an entire airline. Peter kept it that way. He did not attend meetings physically. Instead, he joined virtually using voice-only communication. He never showed his face, and he signed documents with a company alias. Even the CEO of the airline did not know the true identity of the man who now had the power to fire him. Still, Peter was not interested in showing authority. He let the company run normally, only stepping in when necessary. His influence was invisible but powerful. Under his silent guidance, the airline began to stabilize financially. Staff salaries became more consistent, customer service improved, and the company's image brightened again. The board respected the silent owner. Though no one had ever seen him, life went on quietly. Peter didn't change his lifestyle. He still lived in his one-room apartment. He still carried an old carpenter's bag when moving around Lagos. He still ate gari at night when Nipa took light. He looked poor, but behind that simplicity was a man who owned one of the most valuable companies in Africa. Months later, Peter received an urgent email. The airline had secured a major international partnership, and a high-level meeting was scheduled in London. The presence of the majority shareholder, Peter, was required. The board assumed he lived abroad, so they were shocked when he said he would attend in person. That meant Peter had to travel. He had not flown in years. He had never flown first class in his life. In fact, he had never even stepped inside a first-class cabin. But this time he had no choice. His advisors insisted he travel comfortably and safely. Still, Peter insisted on booking an economy ticket. He didn't see the point of spending so much money on a seat when the difference between first class and economy, and to him, was simply wider chairs and better food. But when he went online to book, economy was completely sold out. Only first class was available. He sighed deeply. Well, maybe this is part of God's plan, he murmured. He booked the first-class ticket using his own name, Peter Okazie. The system did not flag him as the owner because everything was hidden under different companies. To the airline staff, Peter Okazie was just another Nigerian passenger. The morning of his flight, he woke early, prayed, and dressed in his usual simple clothes, an oversized shirt, rough trousers, and his old slippers. His beard was slightly overgrown and his hair was not freshly cut. But Peter didn't care. He valued comfort over appearance. He took public transport to the airport as usual. When he arrived, he hurried into the terminal because he was running late. That was the beginning of the humiliation. Peter walked to the first-class counter, ticket in hand. As soon as the staff saw him approaching, their faces changed. One of the attendants looked from his dirty slippers to his scruffy shirt and then leaned toward her colleague. "Why is this kind of man coming here?" she whispered loudly. Peter heard her. He smiled weakly. He wasn't prepared for what was about to happen next. He had no idea that his own workers, his own employees, were about to embarrass, insult, and humiliate him in front of the world. He simply wanted to travel. They wanted to disgrace him. And the battle was just beginning. The sun was barely rising when Peter stepped into Murtala Muhammad International Airport. But the chaos had already begun. Trolleys crashed against each other. Travelers hurried in every direction. Loud announcements echoed from speakers, and the scent of coffee mixed with airplane fuel filled the air. People dressed in corporate suits and designer shoes brushed past him without looking twice. And why would they? To them, he looked like a man who had no business being in an airport, let alone traveling first class. Peter clutched his carpenter's bag tightly, though it carried no tools today. Inside were only his documents, simple folded papers that had the power to silence the whole airport if he ever revealed who he truly was. But he never would. He didn't need the attention. He didn't crave the power. He simply wanted to travel to London, settle business, and return to the quiet life he loved. He hurried toward the first-class check-in counter, slightly out of breath. A long queue had already formed at the economy section. The first-class area was almost empty, just two stylish men with suitcases that probably cost more than Peter's monthly earnings before he became rich. As he approached, the lady behind the counter narrowed her eyes sharply. She was tall, elegant, and wore a heavily powdered face that made her look older than she was. Her name tag read Priscilla, Senior Check-in Agent. She watched Peter approach as if he were walking on forbidden ground. "Good morning, Ma," Peter greeted politely. She didn't respond. Instead, Priscilla glanced quickly at his slippers, his faded trousers, his rough shirt, then at his scruffy beard. Her lips curled slightly in disgust. She leaned toward her colleague. "Why do these kind of people enter first-class side?" she whispered loudly enough for him to hear. Her colleague snorted. "Maybe he's lost." Peter pretended not to hear, though the words stabbed deeply. He cleared his throat gently. "Ma, please, I want to check in." Priscilla didn't lift her head. The economy line is over there, she said coldly. I'm not flying economy, Peter replied softly. She raised her brows, finally looking at him fully. Excuse me? I booked first class, Peter said, still calm. Priscilla burst into laughter. Her colleague joined her. You what? She asked mockingly. I booked it first class, Ma, Peter repeated. The two stylish men standing nearby turned to look at him with amusement. One of them whispered, These poor people want luxury by force. Peter brought out his ticket, printed and clean, then gently placed it on the counter. Priscilla didn't touch it. Where did you get this from? She demanded. It's my ticket, he replied. No, tell me properly, she insisted. Where did you get this from? Did somebody give it to you? Did you find it? Did you steal it? Peter's heart sank. Ma, why would I steal? I paid for it. Priscilla finally snatched the ticket, examined it repeatedly, shook her head like something was wrong and said, How can somebody like you afford this? First-class ticket is not 10,000 naira, sir. People passing by began watching, faces filled with mockery. A woman in high heels said loudly, These poor men are becoming bold. Oh, see how he wants to enter first class. Another added, The audacity. Priscilla called her supervisor immediately. Madam Kemi, please come to counter 4. We have a situation. Peter swallowed painfully. He wasn't used to scenes. He hated drawing attention. But now he was the center of ridicule. Moments later, the supervisor arrived, a stout woman with a stern face and red lipstick. What's going on? She asked. Priscilla pointed at Peter dramatically. This man is claiming he booked first class. Kemi frowned and examined him from head to toe. Sir, this section is for first-class passengers only, she said slowly, as if talking to a confused child. I know, Peter said. That's why I'm here. Kemi took the ticket from Priscilla, inspected it, and sighed heavily. This ticket is real. Priscilla's mouth dropped open. Real, Kay? But, Kemi continued, I still need to know how you got it. Peter closed his eyes briefly before answering. I bought it. Kemi shook her head. Sir, look around. Look at the kind of people here. First class is not for everybody. Something inside Peter cracked. For the first time, he felt anger bubbling, but he forced himself to stay calm. Ma, is this how you treat customers? He asked quietly. Kemi folded her arms. We treat them according to what is appropriate. The humiliation was unbearable. People were watching. Phones were recording. Some were already laughing. A group of young men pointed at him and said, Baba don't dress like carpenter, come first class. Try again. Someone else shouted, Security should remove him, Jare. Kemi finally called security. 2 officers arrived, looking bored but ready to act. One of them stepped closer and said, Oga, we need to confirm your identity. Follow us. I paid for my ticket. Why am I being treated like a criminal? Peter asked quietly. Because this doesn't look right, the guard replied coldly. They moved him to the side like a thief. Other travelers walked past, shaking their heads. He wants to follow rich people, someone muttered. One lady even asked, Who invited him here? Peter stood silently as security asked him pointless questions. Where he lived, what work he did, how much he earned, who bought the ticket for him, why he dressed like that. They searched his bag and found nothing but documents. Still, they made him wait. Almost 20 minutes passed. Other first-class passengers checked in smoothly while he stood like a suspect. Finally, one guard said, Well, his documents are valid. Let him go. Priscilla rolled her eyes. Fine. But if anything goes wrong in that plane, it's on you. She printed his boarding pass roughly and shoved it across the counter. Peter picked it gently, thanked her softly, and walked toward the security screening. But the humiliation had deeply cut him. He remembered the faces, the insults, the laughter. He shook his head as he walked. If only they knew, he whispered. If only they knew who I really am. But he didn't know that the humiliation inside the plane would be even worse than what he faced outside, because the true storm was waiting at 30,000 feet. Peter stepped into the first-class cabin with a quiet sigh of relief. After everything he had endured outside, the suspicion, the insults, the humiliating interrogation, He finally wanted a moment to breathe. The cool air of the cabin washed over him, scented with expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Plush seats lined both sides of the walkway, each one spacious enough to feel like a mini living room. Soft music played in the background, a calming melody designed to relax wealthy travelers. But even in that luxury, passengers looked at him with narrowed eyes as though he had trespassed into their private kingdom. A man wearing a gold wristwatch whispered to his wife, "This one looks like a mechanic. How did he enter here?" The woman chuckled softly. "Maybe he sneaked in. First class is now for everybody." Peter ignored them. He had learned long ago that people judged faster than they understood. He simply located his seat, comfortable, excessive, and far beyond anything he had ever sat on, and gently lowered himself into it. He barely settled before trouble arrived. T-Bag, the first flight attendant assigned to the first-class cabin, approached him with a stiff posture. Her sharp steps echoed through the luxurious silence. Her name badge gleamed boldly. Florence, senior flight attendant. She was tall, fair-skinned, elegantly dressed, and carried herself like the queen of the skies. Her eyes swept over passengers with practiced grace, avoiding till they landed on Peter. Her expression instantly hardened. She walked straight to him with her chin high. "Excuse me," she said sharply. Peter looked up politely. "Yes, Ma?" Her tone changed to a cold, sarcastic note. "What are you doing here?" Peter blinked. "I'm sitting down, Ma." Florence planted her hands on her hips. "I can see that. I mean, how did you enter this section?" Peter kept his voice calm. "I booked this seat." She stared at him, unimpressed. "Sir, be serious. First-class tickets cost more than some people's yearly salary." "I paid for mine," Peter replied gently. Florence's brows shot up. "You paid?" She scoffed loudly, attracting attention from other passengers. "With what? Pure water business?" A few passengers laughed. Peter's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. Florence was only beginning. "Let me see your ticket," she demanded. Peter handed it over without argument. She studied it, flipped it, examined it under the cabin light, then frowned deeply. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "I bought it." "No," she snapped. "Tell me the truth. How did you get this ticket? Did someone give it to you? Did you find it? Did you pick it somewhere?" Peter held her gaze. "Madam, I paid for it." Florence rolled her eyes dramatically. "Look at me very well. Do I look like a fool to you?" Passengers were fully watching now. Some were smirking, some were judging, some were filming him secretly. Florence leaned closer and whispered harshly, "Sir, if you forge this ticket, you will be arrested, so speak now and explain yourself." Peter sighed. "Madam, I don't lie." Florence bent back and nodded sarcastically. "Oh ho, so you're calling me blind? You're calling me stupid?" Peter's heart thumped painfully. "I didn't say that." She raised her voice. "Well, that's what you mean. Because there is no way a man dressed like this," she pointed to his rough shirt and slippers, "can afford this seat." Peter clenched his fingers against his knees. He was trying not to let anger swallow him. He had endured humiliation at the counter. He didn't want another scene. But Florence was determined. She signaled another attendant. "Ngozi, come and see something." A petite woman approached. Florence showed her the ticket. "Look at this," Florence said loudly. "Does this man look like someone who belongs here?" Ngozi glanced at Peter timidly. She was younger, clearly less experienced, and her eyes held more shame than judgment. "Madam, maybe he bought it," Ngozi whispered softly. Florence shot her a deadly glare. "Don't be naive. First class isn't for strugglers." Peter felt his chest tighten. "Ma, please." Florence cut him off. "Don't please me. You will answer questions properly." Her voice rose again, drawing more attention. "Sir, do you know how much this seat costs? Do you know the kind of people that sit here?" Peter nodded slowly. "Yes, Ma, I know." Florence smirked. "No, you don't, because people like you don't sit here." Another wave of laughter spread through the cabin. Peter swallowed hard. Florence lifted her chin. "I will need to verify this with my supervisor. Stay right here. Don't move." She marched off angrily, her heels clicking aggressively across the floor. Passengers whispered loudly, "Maybe he sneaked in." He looks like someone who works at the airport. These poor people are getting bold. He probably stole the ticket. Peter heard every word. He stared out the window to hide the pain in his eyes. He had endured humiliation quietly for many years of his life. But today felt different. Today the insults were not because he was poor. They were because the people attacking him had no idea they were insulting the owner of the airline they were working for. Several minutes passed before Florence returned with a senior crew member, Mr. Daniels, a strict-looking man with a sharp jawline and intimidating expression. Mr. Daniels immediately began questioning Peter. "Sir, can you state clearly how you got this ticket?" Peter took a tired breath. "I paid for it." Daniels looked at him with disbelief. "Paid how? Did you use your card? Someone else's card? Where did you purchase it?" "Online," Peter replied. Daniels exchanged a look with Florence, who smirked triumphantly. "Sir," Daniels said, folding his arms, "this ticket is valid, but in my experience, when someone looks suspicious and cannot explain properly—" "What is suspicious?" Peter cut in gently. Daniels paused, caught off guard. "What exactly about me is suspicious?" Peter asked again, his voice still calm. Florence quickly answered, "Your appearance, your clothing, your slippers, your bag, your attitude, everything. First-class passengers look like first-class passengers." Peter stared at her silently. Daniels cleared his throat and said, "We will have to keep a close eye on you. Any misconduct, and we will have you removed." Peter nodded slowly. "I understand." He did not argue. He did not shout. He simply said 3 words. "I understand, sir." Florence snatched his ticket, shoved it back into his hand, and hissed, "Sit properly and don't disturb our work." Then she walked away dramatically. As she left, Peter whispered to himself, "One day, these people will learn." But he had no idea that the second wave of humiliation, the worst part, was still coming. And it would come from another attendant. One even crueler than Florence. Peter had barely recovered from Florence's attack when the cabin lights shifted, signaling the arrival of refreshments. The flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisle like dancers trained to cater only to the wealthy. Platters of fruits, imported juices, sparkling water, and champagne glistened under the soft golden glow of the cabin. Passengers adjusted their luxury watches, stretched their legs on reclining chairs worth more than Peter's old workshop tools, and prepared to be pampered. Everyone looked relaxed, except Peter, who sat quietly with his fingers clasped together, trying to breathe normally. He had endured enough embarrassment for one morning. He just wanted water, nothing more. But fate wasn't done testing him. A new flight attendant stepped into the first-class cabin, carrying a tray of drinks with rigid elegance. She was tall, dark-skinned, and wore heavy lashes that blocked half her view. Her makeup was thick, her expression proud, and her name badge read, "Sandra, Flight Attendant." Sandra walked with exaggerated confidence, flipping her braids as she passed each wealthy passenger. She smiled sweetly at the businessmen, bowed respectfully to the older women, and lightly touched the shoulders of the elite men who flirted back. But when her eyes reached Peter, the sweetness drained instantly. Her smile vanished. Her posture stiffened. Her eyes narrowed like she had just sighted a criminal. She stopped directly in front of him, tilted her head, and asked bluntly, "What are you doing here?" Peter lifted his gaze slowly. "I'm sitting, Ma." Sandra scoffed so loudly a few passengers turned. "No, tell me the truth," she insisted. "Did you sneak in?" Peter blinked, stunned. "Sneak? No, Ma." She set her tray aside and folded her arms tightly across her chest. "Who allowed you into this cabin? Which gate did you enter from? Which attendant checked you in?" "I used my ticket, Ma," Peter answered calmly, though his heart was breaking. Sandra rolled her eyes dramatically. "Ticket? Let me guess. You found it on the floor?" Some passengers laughed. Peter's throat tightened. "Ma, please, I paid for—" Sandra cut him off sharply. "Don't lie to me. A ticket like this costs more than your entire wardrobe." A man behind Peter chuckled loudly. "Maybe he used his entire life savings," another added. "Or he borrowed money from his village." Laughter echoed. Sandra turned to face the crowd theatrically. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man says he paid for a first-class ticket, dressed like this." Another round of laughter erupted. Peter sat still, staring at his hands. Sandra returned her glare to him. Who are you? What's your occupation? Peter swallowed. I work with my hands. Sandra smirked. A carpenter? Mechanic? Painter? Don't lie. Peter whispered softly. I'm a carpenter. Sandra burst into laughter. I knew it! She snapped her fingers proudly. Look at him now claiming first class. Wonders shall never end. Peter whispered, Ma, please. Please what? Sandra snapped. You are disturbing my cabin. You are distracting the real passengers. And you're talking to me like we're mates. She leaned closer, dropped her voice, and said with venom, people like you belong in economy. Or better still, stay at home. Peter felt tears sting his eyes, but he held them back. He refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing him break. He gathered courage and whispered, I only asked for water. Sandra jerked back as if shocked. Water? You want water? In first class? She looked around, laughing loudly again. What is happening in this country? First poor people want to sit here. Now they want to drink our water. People giggled. Peter exhaled shakily. Ma, please. Just water. Sandra hissed. You better lower your voice. If you raise it again, I will call the security and have you dragged out. Then she grabbed a tiny bottle of water, not even opened, and threw it onto his tray with force. Here, drink, quickly, before someone complains. Peter reached for the water slowly with trembling fingers. But Sandra wasn't done. As she walked away, she muttered loudly, I swear, if he messes up this flight, I'll call airport police myself. The humiliation was too much. Peter stared at the bottle, blinking to keep his tears hidden. He had been insulted like trash, spoken to like dirt, mocked like a beggar, and he had done nothing wrong. Passengers whispered openly, I don't blame Sandra. He doesn't fit here. Imagine sitting beside a carpenter in first class. A whole first class. This is becoming embarrassing. Peter's heart ached deeply. He wanted to stand up and scream, I own this airline. But his nature held him back. He didn't want to embarrass anyone. He didn't want to boast. He didn't want pride to corrupt him. But the pain, it was unbearable. Just when he thought it couldn't get worse, a soft, gentle voice interrupted. Sir, would you like something else? Peter looked up. Standing before him was a young flight attendant, slim, dark-skinned, with innocent eyes and a kind smile. Her name tag read, Amara, cabin crew. Unlike the others, her face showed no judgment, no irritation, no hatred. She looked at him like a human being. Peter cleared his throat, surprised. Just, water is fine, thank you. Amara nodded kindly. Are you okay, sir? You look stressed. Peter forced a smile. I'm fine. Thank you. Amara frowned slightly. If you need anything, please let me know. It's my job to make sure every passenger is comfortable. Her gentle tone melted something inside Peter. It had been years since anyone had spoken to him with such simple kindness, especially in a place filled with pride. But Sandra, who overheard, stomped back angrily. Amara, stop wasting your energy on people who shouldn't even be here. Amara turned calmly. Ma, he's a passenger. Sandra scoffed. Passenger? Don't be stupid. He's occupying a seat that real first-class passengers deserve. If you want to serve him in economy. Amara's voice stiffened. He has a valid ticket. Sandra rolled her eyes. You're new, you don't understand. These poor-looking people cause problems. I'm calling security. Before Peter could speak, Sandra marched off. 5 minutes later, 4 airport security officers boarded the plane. 4. Not 1. Not 2. 4. Passengers gasped. Cameras came out. Phones pointed directly at Peter. Sandra led the officers proudly. This is the man. Remove him before he causes trouble. One officer stepped forward. Sir, stand up. Let's talk outside. Peter felt humiliation crash over him like a wave. Why, dear? He whispered. Sandra answered, because you're lying, and you're making my work hard, and you're not supposed to be here. Peter looked at the officer. I paid. I'm not causing trouble. Sir, please cooperate, the officer said firmly. Amara stepped forward quickly. Excuse me, officer. He hasn't done anything wrong. Sandra snapped. Stay out of this. Passengers muttered. He should be removed. He's making the flight uncomfortable. He's clearly a liar. The officers tried dragging him up by the arm. Peter finally spoke with exhaustion. Call the manager of this airline. Sandra burst into hysterical laughter. You, call the manager? Please, which manager knows you? Do you think we're fools? Passengers laughed too. Peter insisted softly but firmly, call him. Sandra mocked him again. In fact, why don't you call the owner of the airline too? Peter looked straight into her eyes and nodded slowly. I will. Sandra folded her arms triumphantly. Call him now. Let us watch this movie. Passengers cheered mockingly. Peter brought out his phone and dialed a number. They laughed harder. He's pretending. He's faking a call. Maybe he's calling his village chief. Sandra covered her mouth to laugh. Amara, however, stared at Peter, sensing something deeper. Within minutes, footsteps thundered toward the plane. The cabin door opened, and the airline manager rushed in. He looked furious. Until he saw Peter. Then everything changed. Instantly. Completely. And Chapter 6 would reveal the moment the world stopped breathing. The cabin door burst open with a force that startled everyone. Passengers fell silent. Cameras lowered. Even Sandra, who moments earlier strutted around with the pride of a queen, froze mid-breath. The manager of Lion Airlines, Mr. Robert Adeyemi, a man known for his strictness and zero tolerance for nonsense, marched into the first-class cabin. His polished shoes clicked against the floor. His expensive suit swayed sharply, and his eyes blazed with irritation. What nonsense is going on inside this aircraft? He thundered. Sandra's face lit up with victory. She rushed forward like a student reporting a crime. Sir, thank God you're here. This man, she pointed aggressively at Peter, is causing serious trouble. He sneaked into first class, forged a ticket, insulted us, and refused to cooperate. Passengers nodded eagerly, waiting for the drama to escalate. Mr. Robert lifted a brow. Is that so? Yes, sir, Sandra said proudly. He is disrupting the flight. I have been trying to remove him since. Amara stepped forward quickly. Sir, please. He didn't. Sandra shot her a death glare. Shut up. You don't talk when seniors are talking. Mr. Robert raised a hand, silencing everyone. Then he turned and saw Peter clearly for the first time. His face dropped. His eyes widened. His lips parted. The entire cabin held its breath. Then, Mr. Robert's knees bent slightly. He bowed, deeply, respectfully, fearfully. Good afternoon, sir, he stammered. Gasps exploded across the cabin. Passengers exchanged confused looks. Sandra blinked rapidly, unsure she saw correctly. Sir, who are you bowing to? Mr. Robert swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he straightened. Everyone remain silent, he commanded. The cabin went dead still. Slowly he turned toward Peter with the respect of a servant standing before royalty. Sir Peter Bassam, he said quietly, my chairman, my boss, my employer, I am so sorry. The silence cracked like lightning. Passengers froze. Sandra's jaw fell open. Florence stepped back in shock. Even the officers shifted uneasily. The truth dropped like a bomb. Peter, the poor-looking man they mocked, was the owner of Lion Airlines, not a shareholder, not a manager, not a partner. The owner, the billionaire, the man with the power to fire the entire crew with one email. Sandra clutched her chest, her voice faint. Sir, owner? How? Florence stood like a statue, her earlier arrogance evaporating. Peter remained seated, quietly watching the chaos. His eyes softened with pain rather than pride. He had not wanted this. He had not come to show off. He only wanted to travel. Mr. Robert turned furiously toward the crew. Are you people mad? He roared. Do you know who this man is? Florence's lips trembled. Well, we didn't know, sir. He looked ragged, Robert barked. Poor, unimportant, so you humiliated him? Sandra dropped to her knees instantly. Sir, please. I was only doing my job. Your job? Robert shouted. Your job is customer service, not customer abuse. Tears spilled down Sandra's face as she crawled closer. Sir, have mercy! Stand up, Robert snapped. She obeyed, shaking violently. Peter finally rose from his seat. His presence alone silenced everyone. He looked peaceful, but his eyes carried the weight of betrayal. He spoke calmly. You all judged me because of my appearance. Heads dropped in shame. You asked if I belonged here, without knowing that I built the very company you work for. Florence covered her mouth, unable to look up. You mocked me, insulted me, called security on me, embarrassed me in front of strangers, simply for asking for water. Sandra's tears flowed freely. Peter continued, his voice soft yet powerful. You forgot kindness. You forgot humanity. You forgot respect. Because you thought I was poor. The passengers listened in shock, shame creeping across their faces. I could have shouted, Peter added. I could have said who I was earlier. But I kept quiet but calm because I wanted to understand who you truly were. Mr. Robert bowed again. Sir, please forgive them. Peter turned slowly to Sandra first. You, he said. She trembled violently. Sir, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't. You did, Peter said simply, and you enjoyed doing it. Sandra burst into louder sobs. Please, I have children. Please. Peter's voice remained calm. I have no hatred for you, but your behavior is dangerous for this airline. You treat people with cruelty. You abuse customers. You embarrass the company. You judge people by their clothes. Sandra fell to her knees again. Please, sir, don't fire me. I beg. You are relieved of your position, Peter said firmly. Effective immediately. Sandra collapsed forward, crying uncontrollably. Next, Peter faced Florence. Florence shook her head quickly, whispering, Sir, it was a mistake. I didn't know. I thought. You thought, Peter interrupted gently, that poor equals worthless. Florence nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. You are also dismissed, Peter said. Florence covered her face and sobbed painfully. Passengers looked away, uncomfortable. The security officers stepped back cautiously, terrified that they might be next. Peter simply shook his head. You were doing your job, he told them. You may go. They bowed deeply in gratitude and hurried out. Finally, Peter turned toward the only person who had shown him kindness. Amara. The young attendant looked down shyly, unsure what to do. She had defended him without knowing who he was. She had spoken to him like a human being when everyone else mocked him. Peter smiled warmly. You remind me of who I used to be, he said softly. Kind, humble, human. Amara's eyes glistened. I only did what was right, sir. And that, Peter said, is why you deserve more. She lifted her head slightly, confused. In this company, Peter continued, people like you are rare. People who treat others with dignity even when no one is watching. Amara swallowed. Thank you, sir. Peter turned to Mr. Robert. Promote her, he ordered. Effective today. Double her salary, triple her benefits, and enroll her in full training for senior cabin crew positions. Amara gasped, covering her mouth. Tears of gratitude filled her eyes. Sir, thank you. Thank you so much. Passengers applauded softly. Even those who mocked Peter earlier now looked ashamed. Peter raised a hand gently. As for everyone who insulted me today, he said calmly, let this be a lesson. The cabin grew still. You never know who is sitting beside you. You never know the story behind someone's clothes. You never know which destiny you are mocking. He looked around slowly. Treat people with respect. Not because they are rich, but because they are human. Silence. Respectful, heavy silence. Then Peter turned to Amara again. Please help me settle in, he said with a gentle smile. Amara nodded quickly. Yes, sir. As Peter sat back down, the entire plane felt different. No one whispered. No one mocked. No one even breathed loudly. In that moment, a carpenter who once ate Gary in the dark had taught an entire aircraft and the world a priceless lesson. Moral of the story, never judge a man by his appearance, because the man you're humiliating today might be the one signing your salary tomorrow. Never judge people by their appearance or social status. Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty exposes character. Respect everyone, rich or poor, because life can change overnight, and the person you look down on today might be the one you desperately need tomorrow. Thank you for watching this story. I hope you enjoyed every moment of it. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means a lot. See you in the next emotional and inspiring story.